Hello, everyone, and welcome today for the Cybersecurity for Leaders and Information webinar. My name is Vivek Atmakuri, and I will be the moderator for the session today. This session was initially based on the entire outbreak of the COVID-19 and the news always filling up with cyber threats and how companies should keep themselves well equipped, and the leadership team or even the executive of the company, what are the things that they should know or what are the things that they should plan out so that their infrastructure and their employees are all safe from hackers. So to take you through Cybersecurity for Leaders session, we have with us Mr. Goutam Pudota. Hello, Mr. Goutam.
Hey, hi guys.
To give you a very short brief on Mr. Goutam Pudota, he is the cybersecurity at Moller Maersk. He's a certified CISO, which essentially is the highest rank in the entire cybersecurity job vertical, which is a certified information security officer. With over 15 years of experience in the field of information security, he has proven his technical skills across various information security domains and managerial skills on how to set up teams, policies, and procedures to run a successful information security program, both on a tactical and a strategic level. So I guess without any further ado, I can hand it over to you, Mr. Goutam, and you can take it forward.
Thank you so much, Vivek, for the introduction, and a very warm welcome to all the participants out there who are interested in learning about this new situation around we are in, how we can keep our infrastructure, our systems, our clients' data safe. So let me share my screen just a second so you could see. Okay, the screen is up and running. So let's go through our quick learning objectives for this agenda for this call today. So let's try to understand why is cybersecurity important, what kind of possible cyber attacks and threats we need to be prepared for, and as an organization, how prepared are we when an attacker happens, and what can we do? Let's say if there's an attack happens, what we need to do as a reactive and what we need to do as a proactive steps so that we can keep our organization safe. And let's try to understand little deep into what kind of threat agents we would have and what is the cyber kill chain process that would go through so that the hackers, we can understand a bit of hackers mindset and what are the steps they would do to take it further and attack an organization successfully. Without further ado, let's move on. Why is cybersecurity so important? This is one of the biggest boardroom questions that always being asked because one of the things that they see is cybersecurity being one of the cost centers rather than direct a profit center. And one of the biggest challenges as a cybersecurity leader would be to sell cybersecurity internally to all your business stakeholders. Because the question business would come back and ask is, hey, I'm ready to spend this much of amount in your cybersecurity requirements, cybersecurity projects, but what am I going to gain as a business out of this? And one very compelling factor that is coming out recently in the industry is cybersecurity is directly equal to the trust, and the trust creates the business value. And this will be a compelling business differentiator as you go forward. One of the best examples, every time a business manager like sales manager or a procurement manager comes to me and asks why my department should adhere to cybersecurity, one of the best examples I always give them is I'll go back and ask them this example. Hey, you have a choice to open bank account with a bank A or a bank B. And bank A is got hacked thrice in the last 3 years, and customers have lost their confidential data, credit card information, and money as well, worst case. And bank B has never been breached before. So as a customer, where would you put your money in? Would it be a bank A or a bank B? An obvious choice always is going to be bank B because you want to keep your money safe. And we can hear from our beloved PM, and you can also hear nowadays in the industry that data is the new oil. That means data have the value. So if in your organization you have to put one particular thing, your finger on which is having a highest value, that would be the data. And the customers are trusting the organization to put their data with you. So if you are not going to take care of their data, the customer would move on. So it is proven now that there's at least 20 to 25% of the business would only come just because on this compelling differentiator of cybersecurity. That is becoming increasingly important, and also just not from a regulatory perspective, but for direct bottom line business. Cybersecurity is now contributing to the bottom line of the business, which is very, very important nowadays. And yeah, then you have to safeguard your intellectual properties, your financial informations, and your company's reputation, which is more at stake if you are being hacked, right? Imagine many companies moving out of the business just because they got hacked and they lost the customer trust. So customer no more willing to come back to the business. And with the current competitive world we are living in, if a customer moves on to a competitor, to win him back is a Hercules task. So yeah, that's how cybersecurity is helping the bottom line of the organization. Moving on, client expects their data and their assets to be safe. Just like in the previous example we discussed, how you want your money to be safe. Similarly, the client expects their data to be safe so that they can have the services they would like to available when in need. And most important aspect that most business overlooks is that they think cybersecurity is all about those geeks sitting in a conference room or in a corner dark room with a lot of monitors and trying to defend the organization. No, it is just not about technology. Technology alone cannot help an organization win over the hackers. What's more important is people and the processes. People, process, and technology, all three of them together can help you build a cyber resilient organization. You don't trust me? Take this as an example. Every organization's first step when you have an employee coming into the organization is you want to identify who is your employee and who is a third party or who is an outsider, right? So only authorized employee can have access to your data. So most of the organizations basically to authenticate, we use Active Directory. Okay, great. So you have a great technology and you have put complex passwords in place. So you have a technology in place, and then you have communicated that, hey, you know what, every password, it has to be 16 character in length. It has to have a complex ID, and it has to numerics, uppercase, lowercase, all these technology you have put in place. Great. But if your people do not understand the need of it, they can simply write it on a piece of paper and stick the password to their desktops. You don't believe me? I went into many organizations for audit and I have found this in many occasions. And or people simply share their passwords with their colleagues just based on the trust. That entirely removes the authentication principles or violates the authentication policies that organizations would have. That is why it is very, very important. And a very important step I always talk when I talk about cybersecurity is not just for your organization. It is to you. Cybersecurity is required to you as a person as well. Most of the people I have seen that every organization have this password policy that you have to update your password every 90 days. How many of you who are attending right now would change your internet banking password every 90 days? Think about it. If you really understood cybersecurity, you should be applying those best practices and principles into your day-to-day life as well, isn't it? Leaving that thought on, moving to the next slide. Okay, so we understand cybersecurity is important, but what kind of threats do I as a person or me as an organization face? One of the most people used word, viruses. Yeah, that's very common. Trojan horses, logic bombs, phishing and social engineering, zombies, rootkits, insider threats, whatnot. The threats are ever expanding in the cyber world. Why? Because we are living a new era. We are living in the connected world. It is impossible if you are thinking that I'm living in isolated territory and nobody can come and penetrate my network. No, the best defenses would are failing, and they are falling to cybersecurity threats because they are not prepared, simply not prepared for the kind of attacks that are going to happen. So it is very important for us to understand what kind of these threats are. So just to take one big threat that most organizations are facing is phishing and social engineering. And this is becoming increasingly popular among hackers because the sense of security created by social media sites is what making the victims fall prey for it. So you get these kind of emails that exactly look like your customer service or exactly look like your service desk that says that, hey, this is what the new policy is, please click on this link or click on this attachment, and you would be able to understand. And people being so vigilant, they just go and click it. And right now, if you see the McAfee alerts, just for the COVID situation alone, the number of fake websites that have been created that post to give you updates on COVID situation are about 300 to 400 websites domains have been registered. And increasingly many organizations getting these email alerts such as, hey, your organization, since you're going to work from home, you need to click on this link so that the organization pays you for your home office, so please go ahead and register. And they give you a link and you click on the link, you fall the prey. Or they are sending you emails like, hey, this is the latest update about COVID virus in your area, please click on this link to see, look at the demographic. You click and you fall prey. People are need to be aware, and the best defense mechanism is your awareness. Only when your employees are aware, you would be able to defend against these phishing and spearhead phishing and social engineering attacks. And this is not just to office. We keep hearing about these happening to people in real life as well, isn't it? These scams are happening in OLX, these scams are happening in the name of Netflix, and everywhere else. You get these fake phone calls and you fall prey. You give your credit card numbers or CVV numbers just to get a small expiry points or something like that, and you fall prey. People need to be vigilant, people need to be aware, and awareness is the best defense. People need to know what is normal, so they will be able to differentiate what is abnormal or suspicious activity. And the more you encourage your employees to forthcomingly talk and forthcomingly express cybersecurity issues, it will become a lot more easy for the organization to detect such type of attacks. Moving on. If you still think, hey, my organization is still not fallen prey, or I'm cyber proof, please have a look at what's happening around. Cognizant last week, it is all over the news that they have fallen to a new ransomware attack called Maze. And you see that the number of phishing attacks, if you could see, are increased by 250% in the last year alone. Facebook had one of its worst hacks last year. And if you still think, hey, why would criminals need to target my organization? You can see that cyber criminals hacking into Melbourne hospital databases. And you can see that one of the largest shipping companies in the world, MSC, has fallen a victim for a malware based attack. So this is all over the news and it is happening. The threats are real, and it's just a question of if. It's no more a question of if, it's only when. So the more you prepared, the better your organization would be able to react to a situation when it actually hits you. So moving on. So what you need to know is, where are you on a maturity curve for a cyber incident? Are you blind and oblivious, so you turn a blind eye to the incidents that are happening, or you are vigilant and watchful so that you know exactly what is happening in your organization as we speak, and what kind of traffic that's being generated, what kind of alerts that being generated by your log analysis tools. And threat intelligence teams are constantly hunting for the new threats that are out there. And then you have a plan in case the worst hit happens, how you can prove your organization is resilient by recovering from these incidents and provide the trust to your customer that your services are available and the data is not leaked, even though you got hit by a incident. So on a maturity curve, this is where you need to assess your organization. So to help you assess the kind of questions you might need to ask yourself is, at any given point of time, do I know what traffic is coming into my organization, what traffic is generating to go out of my organization, and can I confidently say what's happening on my crown jewels, on my core application systems, what traffic is being generated, and who is monitoring them, how many alerts are getting generated, are they being monitored and being acted upon based on the threat intel they receive from the cyber threat intelligent teams. So as I said, the most important thing for you to understand is, do you know what your crown jewels are? That means, do you know what your critical applications are? Because what you need to have is the list of your critical applications. If you do not have it, I'm sure the hackers do know it. One of the main challenges the organizations face in identifying these is that the large and ever growing structured and unstructured data volumes, right? The data the organization that is trying to collect is ever growing. It keeps expanding every day as we speak. The more and more data being collected, as the more and more hardware becoming cheaper, the archiving solutions are no more being used because they want to keep the data ready and available for analytical and analysis purposes. That's why you see the trend of big data analytics is being widely used to make business decisions. And the control the organization can have on the data lifecycle. The lifecycle includes the creation of the data, where do you store them, how do you use them, how do you archive and delete. So the life cycle of the data, how you can control at each phase, will become very, very important. And the best way to identify your crown jewels is doing your business impact analysis. The best security governance teams that are there in the industry or that are there out there always connect the security goals to the organizational goals. Only then you will be able to obtain the support from executive management for your cybersecurity initiatives. So it becomes extremely important for you to have this cybersecurity strategy defined, so that you will be able to connect the cybersecurity strategy to the business strategy. So that is the best way for you to build the business case. So what you need to have is a very good risk management activity. So one of the most oblivious things or most important things as part of that is to conduct your business impact analysis. How the business processes would impact the business goals, and what are these IT applications that are critical in serving these business processes to achieve the business process goals. So only when you achieve these goals, the business will be able to achieve the business strategy. So it becomes extremely important to conduct your business impact analysis. So you have your asset register up to date, you know exactly what your assets are, and then you classify them based on the business impact they can have when they are unavailable, and based on which you will be able to identify your crown jewels. The more important the application is to the business, the level of security you need to apply needs to be in line with it, because as we all know, all our business cases cannot proceed without a cost benefit analysis, isn't it? The cost to incur in putting your security controls should not exceed the business benefit out of those controls. So it becomes very important for you to ensure the cost benefit analysis is done to understand your crown jewels, without which you will not be able to come out with what kind of a security strategy you can apply to what kind of different systems. So, okay, we understand we need the strategy. So how do I put a strategy? So what is a strategy? As most of you would know, being a senior cybersecurity consultant, it is one of the biggest things, or one of the first things, is to come out with a strategy. And to come out with the strategy, what we need is where we are versus where we need to go. So what is the target operating model we need to be at, and where we are? So as we know both of these, you can build a strategy to be at a target operating model, and a policies and procedures can be linked to the strategy, and a program, cybersecurity programs, can be built so that you will be able to successfully execute the strategy. So as a step one, you have to determine what you have to protect. If you have to determine what you have to protect, you should be having access to all the assets in the organization. Now, the best asset registers that I have seen are always derived from the business processes that they are connected to, so that they will not miss important asset be not being updated in the asset register. So you should have an asset lifecycle management in your organization, so that you have a better asset registers, up to date asset registers, so you know exactly, and the classification of them based on the business impact they do, so you know exactly what to protect. The next step is identify what you are legally required to protect. Okay, we understand that it is very important to protect some of the most business critical applications, but as an organization, you also need to be legally bound to protect information such as PII data, personally identifiable information. So for example, in step one, you would be finding that, hey, I have an ERP system like SAP out there and I need to protect it. Okay, great. So out of which you also need to understand what kind of information or data residing in it that I need to legally bound to protect. For example, I might be collecting customer information like his name, date of birth, or I might be using his shopping carts for behavioral analytics. And I might be having a third party who is helping me to do those analytics. So it becomes extremely important for me to understand as an organization what are my accountabilities are, what am I accountable to protect. Because very important thing you have to remember when you are building the strategy is, especially we are living in the world where we are using many third party suppliers to help an organization. For example, you might be using a cloud system, Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud or IBM, HP. So there are many cloud operators out there, and you might be using one of them to host your data. But remember, you will not be able to shed your accountability of you performing a due diligence. So you need to understand what you are legally bound to protect, because the regulations across the world are becoming more and more stringent. And things like GDPR or China cybersecurity law or the Indian cybersecurity law that is in the draft at the moment, and there are very strict and stringent data disclosure laws that are available. So it becomes extremely important to ensure you have to understand the kind of information that you are expected to legally protect. The third step is about understanding your company's risk appetite. So any control that you want to put, the whole purpose of you placing a control is to keep the residual risk at equal to a risk appetite of the organization. So what is the risk appetite? The amount of risk an organization is willing to take. So what kind of risks as an organization I'm ready to accept, and what kind of risks as an organization I'm not ready to accept. And it becomes extremely important to define this risk appetite clearly, so the operations teams that are out there understand this risk appetite. For example, if the risk appetite of the organization is not well defined, and you found that some of the people who have left your organization still have their active directory IDs active, and as your operations team didn't understand your risk appetite, They've decided that, hey, let's conduct a root cause analysis to fix the exact problem that is causing these IDs to be active, and we keep these IDs active until we find the root cause. And if your risk appetite is not clear, that means until they found the root cause, your organization is continued to expose to these kind of threats that are out there, right? So that is why it becomes extremely important to understand what is your company's risk appetite. So the controls you design are in line with the value creation they do to the business. That is what is very important when you present a business case, so that you can get your support from executive management for the security initiatives that as a cybersecurity leader you are willing to take for your organization. The fourth important step is to understand your threat landscape. Okay, most of the people will try to understand that, hey, my organization is very limited, very small or medium scale organization, I may not be dealing with millions of data, but why would somebody would try to attack me? Because this is the common questions that we face from the business at the top level. And very important thing is, you have to understand that there are different motivational factors for threats, and money is just one of them. For example, I've seen that some of these threats come from people, especially if your organization is doing a lot of carbon emissions. So the people who are pro nature would like to do an attacks on your organization because they don't want your organization to emit a lot of CO2 gases, or your organization has previously exposed some of these environmental threat factors, so they want to attack your organization. So money may not be always the reason that they try to choose. So you have to have for example, scan continuously the social media sites, continuously scan the threat vectors. So you can use threat modeling techniques like, you can do a social media like Twitter deck that helps you identify all tweets that are going on and helps you identify what kind of threats that are being discussed by these hackers out there. Or you can use various threat modeling techniques that might exist for your organization that is exposing data. Especially now, most organizations trying to expose this data with APIs kind of stuff, application programming interfaces with REST and SOAP type of APIs that's being used. You extremely need to be vigilant about your threat landscape so that you understand what kind of threats exist out there. Then you need to understand or build your strategic cybersecurity plan. So you need to, once you know what are your threats, what are your assets, what kind of vulnerabilities they have. So you have your threats, you have your vulnerabilities. So what you need to basically calculate is, what is the probability of this threat exploiting vulnerability? And one of the things that I've seen organizations use is use red teams or do penetration testings to actually confirm whether these vulnerabilities can be exploited by these threats that are out there. And remember, very important thing is, this is not a one-time activity. This has to be periodic activity, so that you, as a business evolving, you would like to see what kind of threats or vulnerabilities exist. For example, the amount of employees that would be working from home 2 months back would be probably around 10 to 20%. But now 100% of your employees are working from home. Imagine the new kind of threats that has exposed you to. If your employees are not so aware, somebody might call and say, hey, I'm calling from help desk. I sent you an email. Can you please click on this link because we see that your laptop is out of compliance? Many of your employees might fall prey for this because they are not prepared, or they do not know how to identify these new threats that are out there, and they might just fall prey that kind of a phishing or a spam emails or spam phone calls that are combined and can be initiated to launch the first phase or to do the first compromise, which post which the hackers can literally expand the hack and then bring down the organizations to its knees. Yeah. So you have to build a plan. So incident response plan is as important as these proactive steps we talked about, because there is no question of 100% security out there. There is no way you can completely bring the risk level to zero. So you only way is you avoid the risk. That is, you, by not performing that business activity, that means you are losing the opportunity of performing the business activity. So that means that you cannot avoid the risk. So that means you will not be able to be 100% safe, but you have to keep the risk, cyber risk, at an acceptable level to the organization, so you can perform the due diligence. So you should plan for it. Always have a plan when the incident happens, how you are going to respond. So it is very important to have a plan and also evaluate and test these plans regularly. So your disaster recovery plans, business continuity plans, similarly a cyber security plan has to be tested frequently and evaluated, so that you understand what are the weaknesses that you have in your plan and how you can go ahead and fix them, so that your plan becomes foolproof. So very important to at least do exercises like tabletop, so that the interactions between your teams become very important. Because you should have on a typical cyber security incident, you will have your network teams involved, you will have your application teams involved, you will have your SOC or global cyber defense center teams involved, security operations centers involved. And based on the amount of a breach, your legal teams might need to be involved. And finally, very important teams, the business teams need to be involved to evaluate the impacts to the business. So there are various teams that are involved. Apart from these, you probably will have a communication plan, so that how you coordinate with all these different teams to execute a cyber incident successfully, cyber incident security defense program successfully, right? So it is becomes very, very important for you to understand various elements of this plan and how they come together when an incident happens. So that is why it becomes important to test these interactions and see if they are happening successfully. So continuous improvement is important. No plan is 100% perfect at the first level. So have these tabletop exercises happening, and then real-time simulations happening, so that you can see you will be able to respond within the golden hour. So the golden hour is a term that is used in the industry, and based on the type of the industry you are in, it can vary between 1 hour to 2 hours. That is, from the time there is an initial compromise happened in your organization, before the virus or worm or trojan that we are talking about spreads through laterally through your network. The first 1 hour or 2 hours becomes extremely important, because the cyber incident response plan will only kick off once you identify an incident. So the sooner you can identify, the better you can respond. And that is why having an incident response plan tested for this golden hour becomes extremely important, so that your organization is well prepared when actually an incident gets reported. And one of the overlooked factors is the importance of your help desk. Most cyber incident security response plans I've seen, what one of the omit factor or ignored factor is your help desk. If your help desk is not so aware about the cyber threats they may have, then the cyber incident response plan kicking off would be that much delayed. So please include your help desks into your incident response plans, so they can help you identify suspicious activities faster. Then we need to move on and understand what are the threat agents. So what kind of threats we have. So as I talked about, the threat agents can have various intents and various capabilities. So for example, you will be having an advanced persistent threat, such as state sponsored attacks. That is, government sponsoring attacks on particular organizations. We keep hearing these, that there are various governments trying to attack particular websites of another country, right? So they are advanced persistent threats. or this could be a rookie college graduate who is trying to get into the world of hacking and trying various exploits. So the kind of intent they have could be extremely varied. So you need to understand what kind of threat agents, or that would be based on the nature of the business you are. And as I said, they are constantly evolving, and as your business varies, business operating models varies, the threats would vary as well. To give you an example, the kind of threats, for example, a few years back, most of the telecom companies would have had, now converted them to have these mobile wallets where they will be transacting or using credit card payments, right? Which was not the case about 5 to 10 years back. They were not, you're not make, they do not have these wallets, mobile wallets, right? And they're not taking your credit card information. So kind of threats they would have had about 10 years back to what is the business operating model they have now is extremely different. Yeah, they give you option to save your credit card numbers, use them for payment. So amount of threats they would have, and the compliance regulations like PCI DSS would be different, right? Payment card industry regulations that they need to adhere to would be entirely different. So you need to understand is in your nature of the business that you are operating in, what kind of threats you exist. And it's very important for you to understand what is the process where a hacker would follow. Yes, hackers do have a process. They do follow a particular life cycle. We call that in cybersecurity a cyber kill chain. So what they do is a recon. Recon is very, very difficult or extremely difficult to identify, because what they are doing at this point is they are trying to identify information that is available out there in the public. They can use your Google, they will try to identify if you have IoT devices, what kind of them are connected to internet, and they will try to scan what is the exposed IP addresses that you may have, and look at uh, various applications that you are exposed to internet. So they try to understand your landscape at this moment. Once they understand that, what they try to do is launch an initial compromise, and that would be to do an intrusion. So this is where they try to either do a, for example, you have a remote desktop RDP applications out there, they will try to do a brute force attack, or they will try to spearhead attacks, spearhead phishing attacks by targeting your IT admins or those people who are exposed, who have access to those higher privilege credentials, so they can launch their initial payload. Once that is done, they will laterally try to spread over the network by using uh, vulnerabilities that exist inside your network. Because very important thing now to understand is all the perimeter security defenses that you have placed will go mostly invalid, depending on what kind of perimeter devices you have, but mostly invalid because the launch is already done and they are now within your network, right? So it becomes extremely difficult after that, unless you have things like network segmentations implemented, that they will be able to laterally spread through the network. Then they will try to understand what kind of applications out there and who are those admin privileges accounts, or if they cannot penetrate through the admin privilege accounts, what they can identify is they will try to identify those users that are compromised, and then do privilege escalation attacks on those crown jewels. So they can try to elevate their level of access that they have, and try to reach to an admin privilege attacks, so that they will be able to easily get access to more privileges than a regular end user would have. Then they can spread through lateral movement. That is, once they have admin privilege access to the network, it is easy for them to spread over the network. And they always ensure they will remove antivirus, any type of logging activities, so that they can remain anonymous as long as possible in the network. And then they will try to launch, once they want you to know, they want to launch denial of service attacks, like they can affect your availability. And they can also do a distributed denial of service, so that they can do a much more sophisticated network level attacks. and then they will try to exfiltrate the data that you have. For example, what we hear from the latest compromise that has happened in uh, the Maze ransomware attack. So in 2017, we all aware that there was a Petya, not Petya type of attacks, where they were doing is just locking your devices or encrypting your devices and then asking money to pay via bitcoins. But this Maze ransomware that is right now affected most of the IT companies looks like they actually have the capability to get your data out of your networks, and if you don't pay them, then they actually threaten you to expose that data out there in the internet. So it becomes more regulatory issues as well. It is no more about availability, because in previous cases, for example, if you had a defenses mounted such a way that you have regular backups taken, if your regular laptop gets encrypted, you can just simply restore it from the backup, and that's it. Then you are safe if you address the root cause of the vulnerability. But if your data is exfiltrated, the problem you have is that regulatory issues, because you have to do a data disclosure laws about what kind of data that is exposed, and what kind of customers that are getting impacted because of this. So it becomes extremely important to understand this cyber kill chain, or the process these cyber criminals are following, so that you can stop them. The best way is to detect early. The early that you detect, the easy for you uh, to put defenses, so that you can keep your organization resilient to these type of attacks. And extremely important topic is to ensure that or sell security to the organization. Cyber security should be everybody's responsibility. It cannot be a cyber security team's alone responsibility, because then you are setting up yourself for the failure. Please ensure that everybody in your organization is aware about their cybersecurity responsibilities. For example, how many of your employees who is working from home have actually changed their network password or router passwords? You can do a simple calculation, you can do a simple pulse survey, and then you would know. You used to work from home only once a day, but now since last 2 months you are working from home every day. So what if your Wi-Fi WPA2 password is cracked, right? It is possible. Then you are exposing your data. So how many times you actually are you changing your Wi-Fi passwords? Are you following the 90-day policy? Very important thought for you to understand. So it's important to understand what is everybody's responsibilities are, and how they do a data classification, so that they understand how to what kind of security mechanisms they need to build in for handling various types of data. Or how do they know what is confidential data, what is internal data, what is public data, so that they are aware about social media guidelines, for example, what kind of things that they can put it out there, what kind of things they don't put it out there. Because most of us will have this home office setup nowadays, and you might be taking notes on a whiteboard or something, and then you take a selfie with it, and on top of the whiteboard you might be having a confidential data behind you. And when you are working from office, we would have had rules and regulation that said, hey, you cannot take pictures because you are working on a confidential data. But that may not be the case when you're working from home. So you have to extremely be vigilant and give that information to your employees, and keep them constantly remind about the cybersecurity policies and principles, the do's and don'ts, so that they will be able to stay cyber resilient and keep your organization cyber resilient in term as well. So what is important is to define what is normal, because the best source of information you would get is from your employees. So they should be forthcoming and saying, hey, you know what, by mistake I clicked a link that looks like malicious, can you please help us out? So that before it actually spreads, you can stop. So you need to encourage as a cybersecurity team these kind of behaviors, so that they will be able to report, and they will be able to forthcoming in helping the organization stay cyber safe. And one of the things that I see most organizations follow is have this common program across the organization. Having just a 1 hour cybersecurity program for all your employees is helpful, but not really so much helpful. The best way is to have targeted awareness programs. The kind of an awareness a developer would need would be extremely different to what a end user or a business user would need. So for example, your what kind of data are you, as a developer, you need to talk about to him is what kind of code he publishing into GitHubs, because nowadays people are moving towards agile methodology, continuous integrations and continuous deliveries, using these code repositories to check in, check out, and having their keys. So what kind of security mechanisms they built into the code? Do you have secure by design mechanisms? Do you think about security when you're designing new systems? Is becomes extremely important. So have these policies and procedures in place, and ensure that you have these targeted awareness programs, so that you will be able to help or keep this content of your cybersecurity awareness program relevant to the job role of that employee, so that you will be able to help build applications that are cyber safe, and ensure that your engineering teams, your development teams, your quality assurance teams are aware about cybersecurity. Cybersecurity requirements are baked in, and the ISMS policies that you have or cybersecurity policies you have are known to entire employees, and what is the do and what is the don't is available to employees. And just to be specific to the COVID situations or working remotely from the situations, ensure that you have a cyber checklist that contains things like what are the do's and don'ts when they are attending remote calls, what are the do's and don'ts or access points, what access points they can use, and do's and don'ts around the physical security of the devices. Have this checklist and circulate it to your employees, so that they are aware what is the organization expecting them to do, and keep constantly remind. Remember, cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility, not just the cyber team alone. The better this message is across the organization will stay resilient more. And with that, Vivek, can we move on to the question and answer session, so we give our
Sure,
viewers and
definitely.
attendants a chance to interact with us?
Definitely. And also a quick note, Stanford, in association with Great Learning, is also going to be launching an 8-week cybersecurity strategy program, which is more along the lines of cybersecurity for leaders. This will be coming up soon. So if you wish to join in for this program or would like to know more information about the same, please feel free to reach out to us at cybersecurity@greatlearning.in, or feel free to drop us a message on our website. In the meantime, we'll quickly pick up some questions from chat. Okay, Raghavendra has asked a question. Generally, within companies, cybersecurity is nestled under or put under the roof of IT operations, and because of that, not every company has enough budget that goes towards it. What do you believe? Should it be having its own department, or is it fine just being put under a CIO and everything operates the same?
This is a very good question, Raghavendra. This is a trending discussion right now in the industry as well. Should a CISO, that is Chief Information Security Officer, should have a place along with the CIO on the boardroom, or CIO, who is primary focus is to ensure operations are running, information processes are running, should represent the security as well. There is no right or wrong answer to it. It really depends on how much freedom a CISO have to put in the strategy. And coming to the question about the budgets, it really, as I said, cybersecurity is very difficult to directly tie up with the bottom lines, but if you can show the trust and resilience that's being built up, if you have the mechanisms to, or KPIs, the key performance indicators put around those trust and resilience that you're building, so that organizations can continue to operate in a cyber incident situations, and how you connect the security goals to the organization goals will become a key thing in getting or securing the budgets. most of the things as will not rely solely on the shoulders of CISO. We've seen that organizations will form as a security governance committees. So these security governance committees will have equal representations from business as well. So when the decision is jointly taken or the business inputs are taken before these controls are being put in place, the chances of you getting a cyber security budgets are really, really high. So yeah, that the best thing is it's not just about the reporting lines, but how you can connect the cyber security strategy to overall organization strategy will play a key role in securing the budgets.
Okay,
But a very, very valid and important question, Raghavendra.
thank you. Another quick question that came up by Deepak Misra. He essentially asks you what are some of the tools or modes of security that companies utilize to do an initial check whether their organization is secure. Are there any kinds of processes that they follow, or what is the first thing that a company thinks about if they believe that they've been hacked?
Very good question. So it really depends on what kind of defense mechanisms you would have mounted. So the first thing generally every organization would like to go and understand is where the first compromise happens. If it is believed to be from a network or perimeter, what we would like to look at is what kind of SIEM logs you have, like tools. The tools that we are going to name are not, we are not endorsing those tools. These we are using as a, from a great learning perspective, we are using just as an example, just as a disclosure. So SIEM tools like Splunk, for example, or there are many other SIEM tools from Microsoft as well that are used. So if those are Akamai kind of a solutions that are available in case you're believed to have a DOS or DDoS type of an attack. So those are the kind of tools that you kind of look at to see what kind of logs you have and to understand where the compromise is. And as part of incident response plan, the most important thing or the first thing an organization will try to do is try to contain the incident, because containment comes first before eradicating an incident. So an incident response procedure would follow through that: identify an incident, classify the incident, contain the incident, respond, and then recover. So that would be the general life cycle of a cyber incident planning and response would go through. So yeah, you can use log analysis tools so that you will be able to understand what kind of compromise happened and how you ensure that there is a clock synchronization for these log analysis so that your analysis is correct. And post that, you try to segment or separate it out. And if you believe that it needs to be proven in the court of law, for example, you need to take somebody to the court, then forensics analysis would come in, so that you want to ensure that the forensic evidences are maintained, chain of custody is maintained, which is integrated into your cyber incident planning and response. And legal and communication teams are appropriately informed if they believe what kind of a compromise has happened, so that you can stay compliant to data disclosure or compromise disclosure laws that are out there.
All right, thank you so much. Diane has asked a question. Given security operations and incident ops is outsourced these days, do we really trust the way that they conduct themselves, given that cybersecurity is something that is constantly developing and hacks are always, so should we trust heavily on outsourced security, or should we build in our own R&D team?
A very, very interesting question again. There are two perspectives from the industry that we see right now on this. The first one is some of these industries want to focus what is their core business strength is. For example, if you're talking about a banking, or if you're talking about an insurance companies where there are heavy penalties or regulations, so they want to focus on their core strength of banking or insurance, but they want to leave the operations of SOC or global cyber defense centers that we want to call now, so that there is an experienced team that is out there to help them out identify these constant threats and vulnerabilities, because they don't believe that is their core strength or that is their core business. However, it really depends on the kind of incident response plan testing that you have, because based on your question, I think what I understand is how do we ensure they are actually operating effectively, so that we know that they can keep us safe in case of a real incident happens, right? So that is where, as I told you in our slides as well, the more testing that you do, the simulation attacks that you do, you would be actually knowing how your SOC teams are responding within those golden hours or not. So there are tools that are out there where now the people build virtual machines so that they don't have to really compromise a real machine, and then see whether your SOC team actually picks it up or not. And they try to report, saying like calling as an end user, simulating an attack, saying, hey, my laptop, I see a ransomware screen, but I don't know what is the thing, what should I do. And then let's see how your SOC responds to that, and how do they identify the compromise, how the payload would have delivered. So these simulations becomes the key in your preparation. So there is no right or wrong about you having an inside team or you having an outsourced team. It really depends what is your business strategy. And However, as I said, the more important thing as if I am sitting as a cybersecurity head, would I look at is how effectively the system that I've set up is working, so that I can give confidence to my executive management that when an incident happens, we know what to respond and how to respond. And the only way it can happen is by doing these simulation attacks and see how your SOC would respond, either internal or external. But having a cyber threat intelligence teams is very, very important, because the threats are evolving, and having that either internal or external, but having that knowledge of threats and vulnerabilities is more important.
Okay. Uh, a question by Raj was in the session today. What are the parameters that we should take in consideration when we are creating a cybersecurity checklist?
Uh, Cyber threat checklist, it really depends. If you're, I'm expecting you're talking about the work from home checklist I was talking about. So at a very high or broad classification levels, you should think about your home security, that is your home access points, what they're connecting, how the site to site connectivity, VPN connections, Citrix connections, how we are providing, what kind of vulnerabilities out there. For example, um, we know that after people started working from home, most of these uh, Citrix operating, there were 0-day vulnerabilities that were discovered, and how your patch management is working to ensure that those discovered vulnerabilities are identified. So that could be on your connectivity issues. Then you need to think about is video calling features, and the IP addresses. Are you in compliant with the local regulations around it? Especially, if, for example, if your company is operating from China, China have a cybersecurity law that says that some of these Google products or the Facebook kind of products are blocked. But if your VPN allows the end users to access them, then you might be in violation of those regulations. So you have to ensure, are you in compliance with local rules and regulations or not, by using these VPNs. In even in India, Department of Telecommunications has given a 2 months exception that you can take Vivo IP calls without private virtual networks that you might have end to end. That was the previous case. So these are the kind of things that you will consider, and also about physical security of the devices. How do you ensure that, or remind constantly about your employees, especially those who have higher privileges, elevated accesses, like your privilege access management, and how you ensure or you remind them that they don't log in with those privileged accounts unless absolutely necessary. And remind your developers about the API keys or the developer keys that they handle, what they are going to check into the public GitHubs, and what they are not using in their memory dumps, kind of stuff. And do not defer any of those updates or patches that you are trying to push, SSEM pushes, software center pushes that you are making, so that you're not going to delay them, so that your operating systems are up to date. And just not the laptops. Nowadays most organizations also use mobile phones. So how you keep the mobile application management softwares that you may have, or mobile device management software that you have, device compliance, ensure that the devices are compliant to the policies, and monitor them regularly to see if there are any devices out of compliance, and take appropriate actions like disconnecting them to the services, or ensuring they are encrypted, kind of stuff, so that you keep the information safe, the data safe as well. And also remind constantly about the data classification rules they need to follow. Just because they're sitting at home doesn't mean that they can upload data into a USB drive, or they can upload a confidential data into a Google Cloud, kind of stuff. So constantly remind them, and also keep the tools like, for example, CrowdStrike, to ensure that you keep track of the end user activity, and remind them that by law you are monitoring the activity. And have browsing patterns like Zscaler kind of a tool that is out there, so that you can ensure that they only browse the activities that are necessary, and all the rules that apply in office still apply at home too.
Okay. We received a question from Deepika. She has asked for a company that is looking to implement a cybersecurity division. For a company that's looking to implement a cybersecurity division, how does the entire decision making take place? Do they just hire a CISO and give him an X amount of budget, or do they slowly round up that is a couple of analysts and then a team leader, or and then finally a CISO?
This is basically a managerial way of looking into stuff, but if I given an opportunity, I will always hire the top consultant or the top CISO kind of a role, or we call it a cybersecurity officer or chief information security officer, you name it, whatever the role is. The reason is the cybersecurity do not go from bottom up. It has to be top driven, because the commitment that you need from a senior management is heavy, especially for you to implement tactical solutions. So tactical solutions are comes after a strategic solution is built. So you have to understand what kind of risks as a business you face, and then connect the tactical solutions to address those business risks. Only then you would give a budget. So you don't get a budget saying, hey, starting of the year, this is 10 crores, please go ahead and implement whatever the tools you need. No, that's not how it works. So the CISO would go with a strategic understanding of what kind of business goals that are out there, and how putting a cybersecurity solutions would help. To give you an example, for example, an organization might want to go with a sales app, because having a mobile app is more easy for a sales team to make more sales to the organization. So if that is the business strategy, then cybersecurity officer would go and say that, hey, if you want to develop a mobile app, we need to think about a secure way of developing a mobile application in house, or we want to outsource it. If you want to outsource or take a mobile application that is out there, we want to see that, evaluate that vendor, how he handles the mobile app, look at the code. If the code is not delivered to the organization, how do we make a source code escrow kind of an agreement? Okay, great. Let's have that, and then put the security in place, so that whatever the customer sales information we have in that app do not get leaked. So to put that in place, we need to have a security mechanism. This is the role of a cybersecurity officer. So the consultant, what he will come up and see, oh, you want to secure a mobile application, then you have mobile application management solutions like Intune, Microsoft Intune, or you have a mobile application management solutions like AirWatch. So there are various tools that are out there. So which one we want to do? So we do a cost benefit analysis and go ahead and implement them. So strategy comes first than tactical solutions. So that's why a top tier will get hired first, so that they understand the strategy and then get the tactical solutions.
Okay, great. Thank you. I guess we can take one final question for today. This essentially is coming from Gautami. She has asked, what is the way forward now, given the current COVID scenario and everyone is working from home? What is the step that companies who are new to cybersecurity should implement?
Uh, One of the most important things they have to check is the connectivity, how securely you can access the company's applications from home. Either it will be a VPN or via Citrix or a point-to-point connectivity, depending on what kind of a solution, how secure it is, and ensuring that the cyber awareness campaigns being run for the employees, because this is not a planned activity. COVID happened and all of us are forced to work from home overnight. So the awareness or maturity level of different employees would vary depending on the employees understanding of cybersecurity. So ensure there is a awareness campaign that being run, the acceptable use booklets or acceptable use policies of your assets being communicated to these employees, so that they understand how to handle these assets and applications safely and securely, and constantly remind them that the customer data or the personal identifiable information has still be confidential, and also remind people that you can still watch what the activities that are being done, so that that helps the teams understand what are the best things that they can do and what not to do, and also set up a process how they can request for help for any of their issues. And this process has to be well communicated, so that Nobody can impersonate and call them as if they are calling from the company, so that your employees do not fall prey for the phishing emails. So yeah, those are the some of the stuff that you should take care, because we've been pushed overnight to this work from home scenarios.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Gautam, for sharing your insightful information about cybersecurity and how the leadership should essentially drive decision making and make it proactive rather than just a reactive scenario. Thank you, folks. I really hope that you were able to gain some useful insights from the session today. Uh, if you would like further information about this program, the 8-week Cybersecurity for Leaders, that is learning in association with Stanford, then you could definitely reach out to us on our website or drop us an email at cybersecurity@greatlearning.in. I'll repeat, it's cybersecurity@greatlearning.in. There's also a session feedback link that has been posted on the chat. So please make sure you drop in your feedback so that we'll be able to reach out to you and help you out with this program going forward. Thank you, Gautam, for joining us today. And thank you, folks, for your patience during the entire session. We hope you've got to learn a lot more about cybersecurity.
Thank you so much, guys. It was a pleasure talking to you all.